Good morning, Rabbi. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today has been dedicated in loving memory of Jack Abta, Alav Hashem L'Nishmat Yaakov ben Rachel, sponsored by his son Meir Abta. Also dedicated in loving memory of Ms. Lily Safra L'Nishmat Leah Bat Chana. Her philanthropy has reached so many throughout the entire world. Dedicated in loving memory of Rose Kada, Lilu Nishmat Rosie Bat Claudie for the third year Askara by the Kada family. For the Refuah Shlema of Rabbanit Chana, Farhi Chana Bat Tzima Fega, and Be'ezrat Hashem as well for the Refuah Shlema for Eliyahu Shimon ben Mazar Fortun Rabbi Eli Abadi. The week of Cobra is sponsored by David E. Ash in honor of you and your substantial capacity to do good today and every day. My friends, let us begin. Vayikra el Moshe, my bar mitzvah parasha. Veidaber Amona elav oel moed lemor. It was also, unfortunately, Parashat HaChodesh. It was also Shabbat Rosh Chodesh. So I had 3 Sifrei Torah. So everyone else was happy. I was miserable. Okay. I'm an overachiever. What can I say? I did not read it all. Thank God I did not read it all. I did not read it all. I read Vayikra and I think I read Vayikra and I may have read Parashat HaChodesh. I don't remember. I think I definitely. Oh, that's what I meant. Sorry. I think I read Vayikra and Rosh Chodesh, not Parashat HaChodesh. Okay, let us begin. The pasuk tells us, Vayikra el Moshe. In every Torah that we open up, we notice that the word Vayikra has small aleph. Why does it have a small aleph? So the Balaturim writes, and we're all familiar with the idea that Moshe Rabbeinu was uncomfortable with the pasuk saying Vayikra, because Vayikra is, as Rashi explains, a lashon, an expression of great closeness and connection between God and the person it's saying it about. Vayikra el Avraham, Vayikra el Moshe. So Moshe did not feel that it's nice that it should be written that way about him. So he wanted instead to write the word Vayikra, which means, and God happened upon Moshe. Illustrating and indicating that the fact that God was calling to Moshe was a matter of happenstance. Like he needed a Navi, so he was like, you. He happened to choose me. But meanwhile, it could have been somebody else. So Moshe wants to write Vayikra, and Hashem says, no, effectively. Can't change the Torah. So instead, what does Moshe do? He leaves it as Vayikra. He leaves it as Vayikra, but he makes the aleph small so that the word reads instead of Vayikra. If you're not paying close attention, what do you see? Vayikra. If you're paying close attention, the word is whole. The Torah has not been changed. Rav Shach asked a brilliant question. He asked, I don't understand. Obviously, if we're sitting here having a conversation about the small aleph, so we're learning a lesson from the fact that it was written with a small aleph, indicating that if it was not a small aleph, the lesson we'd be learning is something else, correct? That means that Moshe made a decision to change what we're learning from this word. Right? Isn't that a brilliant question? Why did Moshe think that it was okay to change the lesson from this to this? Powerful question. So he answers something unbelievable. And of course, because we're Jews, we go down this beautiful little rabbit hole. Follow me. Alice in Wonderland, let's go. He says that Moshe understood that the message that he was sending about anava, about humility, was as important as any other message could have been. Where does perhaps Moshe Rabbeinu draw this line, this idea from? The concept that anava is more important. The Sfarim tell us that the Torah was designed, the purpose of Torah. What was the purpose of Torah? Does anyone know? What's the purpose of Torah? On a simplistic level, you look at it, you say, I know. Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha Omer, Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu lezakot et Yisrael. Hashem wanted lezakot et Yisrael, to give the Jewish people merit, Why do we have Torah? So that we could earn merit. Simple. Yes? Olam haba, beracha, fine, great. However, the word lizakot reveals perhaps a deeper layer of what Rabbi Chananya ben Akashia was teaching us. The word zaka ubara. Zaka ubara, zaka ubara. Why am I singing? Because I just got a message this morning from one Joel Basalian who told me that he ran the Jerusalem Marathon just now while listening to the shiurim. So I figured he's got no music. I'll throw in a Shore Shira, Lichvora Torah. Hazi, I just want to give advice. Anyone who's running the marathon listening to the shiurim, there's a setting on your phone. You can listen in double speed. It will increase your timing. You listen to me slow, Barminan. It can take 3 days to get there. If you decrease their timing, yes. You run faster, khalas. All right, listen to me on double speed. All right, Zaka ubara means clean, pure. Where else do we have it? Shemen, zait, zach. Zach means pure. Let's look at Rabbi Chananya ben Akashia again now. Ratzah Kadosh Baruch Hu lezakot et Yisrael. He wanted to cleanse the Jewish people. He wanted to purify the Jewish people. Now these two lessons that we just learned in Rabbi Chananya. Sammy is dying right now. He wants to interrupt me and say Rabbi Chananya and start saying Kaddish. I'm not going to give him the opportunity. I'm not going to pause for a breath. There's two layers to this Rabbi Chananya. The first Rabbi Chananya is Hashem wants to give you merits, spiritual dollars, Gan Eden, Beracha in this world. The second idea is no, it's not about merits, it's not about points. It's not the lottery over here. You're not in Vegas with the chips, okay? That's not what's happening. Rather, lezakot et Yisrael. But my friends, my rabbi taught us that these two ideas are actually interwoven. The merit system of Gan Eden, is not dry dollars, spiritual dollars in the spiritual bank. The merit happens because of the cleanliness. Let me explain for 1 second. Gan Eden is something that none of us has ever seen. How do I know? Because the pasuk says, "Ayin lo ra'ata Elohim zulatecha." An eye has not seen it other than yours, God. Obviously, a living eye. So Gan Eden, what is Gan Eden? We don't know. We don't understand. But one thing I can tell you, we do know that the essence of the incredible pleasure of Gan Eden is drawn from our proximity to and our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there's no joy and there's no pleasure in this universe that can match it even for 1 split second of our soul connecting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with God. But this idea of connection, it's not a prize that you win. Rather, it's a reality that you experience, that you create. This is one of the great misunderstandings about Judaism's crime and punishment, about Judaism's mitzvot and rewards. We think about it in human terms as a disconnected reality. As an example, I go to work and I get paid. So the work results in the pay. Now, even though those two things connect, right, they are separate things inherently. So as an example, could you work and not get paid? Potentially. If the guy steals, the boss doesn't pay you, steals from you. So there's a possibility of having one without the other. Mitzvot and reward and neglect of mitzvot and punishment operate more like a person who's trying to get in shape in the gym. You go and you work out and you run and you lift weights. It's not like someone comes to you and says, I see that you've been really trying. Here's muscles. Here's weight loss. It's the actual act itself of exercise that gives you the muscles. That is the inextricable result from the exercise. The cardiovascular activity, which causes your heart to pump harder, which needs you to burn more fat, that the actual fat burning is not the reward of running. It is the natural and interrelated reality of the fact that I've done something. When a person does a mitzvah, they're not rewarded for that mitzvah. The mitzvah becomes a part of them. And that is its reward. You are now a more spiritual being because you did a more spiritual thing. You now benefit the rewards of that because being a more spiritual person, you live a more spiritual life. And that is rewarding. The sachar, the reward, is not disconnected from the act. It is the absolute outcome of the act. So when a person is punished in this world for not doing it, imagine a guy who goes to the gym and says, listen guys, I've gained 30 pounds, 2 inches, 3 inches on my waist. And the guy says, that's because you haven't come to the gym. I can't give you your money back, sir, because you haven't been to the gym in a year. The guy says, listen, it's not my fault. I've not been well. I've been in the hospital. That's why I've not been coming. The gym guy says, I'm very sorry to hear that, but that doesn't mean that the gym's not working. You're not in the gym. With whatever reason, with whatever excuse, you're not here, you're gaining weight. What does that have to do with me? You understand? When a person does avon, even if they have a reason why they did the wrong thing, even when a person, it wasn't their fault, but at the end of the day, they're not benefiting the benefit of having the mitzvah, of staying away from the averah. My friends, the reason why I'm sharing this is because we now look at what Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching us. Moshe said, the ultimate purpose of Torah is the purification of a person. Now, without getting into the Kabbalistic levels of what that means, a person prays. What happens to a person who prays? A woman came to me, and she said, you know, Rabbi, I don't understand. Are you teaching Shalom Bayit classes in the shul? I said, sometimes. She says, no, like in the morning. I was like, no. I mean, we give classes on many topics, but she says, my husband started coming to shul, and the guy, he's a better husband now. And I don't understand what's going on, but whatever you're doing, keep it up. I said, thank you. I can't take credit, right? But thank you. What's happening to this person? How is prayer affecting his Shalom Bayit? Can anyone explain? How could a class, which has nothing to do with his wife, how could that be teaching him to be a better husband? And the answer is, my friends, naturally, when a person prays, they are humbling themselves. Naturally, that's what happens. You're admitting that you can't do something by yourself. That's not an idea that exists in isolation with regards to you and God. It's also an idea that exists with regards to you and your wife. You recognize you can't do it by yourself. You recognize someone else's accomplishments and what they bring to the table. So the rabbi is talking about not stealing. The rabbi is talking about telling the truth. The rabbi is talking about having kindness. The rabbi is talking about... So you know what? Those don't exist in isolation. A person is thinking the way I act, the way I behave, the way I speak, the way I think. It has to be in a refined manner. What happens? This refined person is now applying a refined template to his wife, to his children, to his parents. This thing is a one-size-fits-all. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, if Torah is about refining, purifying the person's behavior, those things called midot, we know that the most important midah of all the midot is which? Anava. Ramban, I'm going to quote him again in Igeret HaRamban, in the letter that he wrote to his son to be read every day, which is a big sigulat to read. It says about Anava, Shehi midah tova mikol midot tovot. Do you understand that? So Moshe Rabbeinu says, if the point of Torah is to refine the person, what lesson could be greater in the world of midot than the lesson of anava? There is no better midah than anava. Clear? That's why Moshe Rabbeinu made the choice. To try and to minimize the letter of the letter Aleph. As the Sefer Otzot Torah, he asks an amazing rabbit hole question. He says, okay, so you started off by telling me that Moshe wanted to change it, Hashem says no. So then Moshe makes the Aleph smaller. So then Rav Shach asks us a question, how did Moshe do that? That changes the lesson. So you answered me that Moshe Rabbeinu said, it's true, it changes the lesson, but whatever lesson it changed from, it's more important than that lesson. But if that's the case, why didn't God actually let Moshe write Vayikra, and then we would learn the lesson even more clearly? Because it says, and it happened upon Moshe. Are we good? You all with me on the question? So he brings the most beautiful answer. He says, in fact, there is something more important than the midah of anava. And what is it? God could not bear to write the word Vayikra because it happened. Because the idea that things in this world are a coincidence is writing God out of the story. And you might have all the anava in the world, but if in order to learn anava you lost God, it's unconscionable. So we couldn't have it that way. We couldn't write Vayikra because the person that has anava but doesn't have God, what kind of life do they live? Ultimately, when a person does not have God in their life, it is impossible for that person to truly live a moral or ethical life. And I know that sounds like a big statement. Without God in your life, it is impossible to live a truly moral or ethical life. And let me explain and back up that statement. Don't you know people who are not religious, who are good people? How could I say that? A person might be an atheist, nicest guy. How could I say that you can't live a moral or ethical life if you don't believe in God? You know what the answer is? Sans God, if you take Hashem out of the picture, then the moral or ethical code that you are living is whatever you happen to decide. Because who is the arbiter of good and evil if you remove God? It's you. So whatever I happen to decide is whatever happens to be good. By the way, that is the world we're living in right now. That every 3 years we're deciding that we just did, that was wrong. We're going to do something else now. We're going to do something else now. We're going to do something else now. And the value system of our entire world went off a cliff. You know why? Because there's nothing that's unchangeable. There's nothing that's divine. And that which was thought of by humans previously can now be undone by humans today. We are experiencing in American law the idea of the Constitution, but a Constitution that was written by humans, which can then be amended by later humans. If enough people vote, then they can change anything. Just understand what that means. Understand that in America, there is a possibility that we potentially could gather together in an extremely right-wing or extremely left-wing government and change the basic laws of what makes America America. Why? Because that's what democracy is. Democracy comes from the Greek word democracy, the ruling by the masses. Oligarchy is the ruling of the one, right? Monarchy is the ruling of the one. Oligarchy is the ruling of the few. Democracy is the ruling of the masses. So democracy means that the people can decide to change something. By the way, it's interesting because what's happening in Israel right now is that a government was voted in a democratically held election. And they should be able to do with the law effectively. That is what democracy means. Is it fair? Do people like it? Probably not. So you know what you do? Vote. Now again, I'm not getting into the concept over there, and whether it's right, whether it's wrong, whether it's holy, whether it's profane, whether it's going to be beneficial for Jewish people, not beneficial. I'm talking about the laws of democracy. The laws of democracy dictate that when the people ask for something, as a people, they are allowed to self-govern. It is a law of the people, by the people, for the people. My friends, imagine morality that looked like that. You know what you've just introduced? Not a moral or ethical code, but something which is subject to groupthink and to mob psychology. Now, in the terms of human democracies, part of human democracies is built on mob psychologies. And we don't have a problem with that because that's always been part of what democracy is. Not each isolated person living in his homestead in Wyoming making up his own mind, but listening to people give inflamed, excited speeches. By the way, Germany, Hitler was democratically elected. One could argue that there was so much pain, there was so much fear of voting against him that it wasn't a true democracy. Like what's going on in the West Bank. Maybe there's enough fear introduced into the mix, so it's not a true democracy. But in a scenario where no one's coming to your house to beat you up because you voted Republican or you voted Democrat, then you have a full Congress or a full Senate and they vote one way. Is that democracy? Yes, it is. That's what it means. Okay? Now, my friends, imagine a moral system that looked like that. Imagine a moral system which was given to influence of TV shows, of big, billboards, where all day long they're hammering home subliminal, implicit, explicit messaging. Messaging that you don't even realize has entered into your own brain. Eventually, anything can be normalized. So as an example, if alternative families are being shoved down your throat in TV shows and big posters and buses and advertisements, what happens eventually to a person that doesn't have an ethical system that is immutable? Eventually, what do you say? What are you talking about? It's normal. Do you know who else did that? Goebbels did that. Julius Streicher did that. They painted Jews again and again and again and again as parasites, as a virus, as people trying to achieve world domination. And what happened? Eventually, the German people, the regular guy, the farmer down the road, the guy who lived his whole life with Jewish neighbors, he was convinced. You cut God out of the story. Even with the best midot, with the best moral code, you might happen to be living a good life today, but is there any guarantee that you will be living a good life tomorrow? Who knows what will happen to values that can shift because they're not held by a higher power? So God says, that's why Hashem disagrees with this Vayikra. My friends, let's end with this. I think we should all read Dan Arbus' article on the Wall Street Journal, where he discusses many of the challenges and pitfalls of this exact subject. My friends, I want to end with this. Effectively, if that power, if that idea that God has to be in the story, and we should not be apologizing for that. None of this begins without the conversation of God. My friends, if that's the case, then we are left with something very, very beautiful here. Because we have one more question. It's our last question in the rabbit hole. God was so against writing the word Vayikra, which means that he happened, because that illustrates that things just happen. That's what God was worried about. That you can't have the idea that there's no God, that things just take place by themselves, written in the Torah. It's already written in the Torah. Where does it say, and God happened upon? By Bil'am, it says, Vayikra, and God happened upon Bil'am. So it's already in the Torah that God happened upon Bil'am. Says the Sforno something unbelievable. Listen, hold on to your seats for this one. He says that the reason why it says Vayikra and God happened upon Bil'am is because God's hashgacha piratit, God's specific divine intervention, is not something that applies to every person on this world. He says it doesn't necessarily apply to a guy like Bil'am. He says it doesn't even necessarily apply to every single Jew. Listen to what he says. It's so powerful. He said God's intimate, specific, divine intervention for your life is dependent on your specific interaction and relationship with him. We know already that when a person's emunah increases, their faith increases, their interaction and interrelation with Hashem goes up a level. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, interacts in that person's life in a much more revealed way. As much as you're willing to lift up the blanket, that's how much you'll be able to see. Lift up the curtain, that's how much you'll be able to see. And it will increase a person's own experience. That's why they used to say that if a person finds himself in a difficult situation, they should say again and again and again, repeat and drive into their minds, En od milvado. There is nobody but God, no power but God, no influence but God. The more a person drives that into their memory, into their idea, into their thought, the more that becomes not just the experience from their perspective, but what they experience in their actual life played out. The more you shove God out, the more Hashem says, you want to drive? Here's the keys. The words of the Chovot HaLevavot are, you don't want to work, you want to live with faith, you don't want to believe in God, Mesir Hashgachato Mimenu. Hashem says, I'm going to take off my divine protection, and let's see. Because in a sense, the removal of that divine protection is a natural outcropping of, as we said earlier, of you creating distance between you and God. God's always there. You put up walls. You put that wall up. If God's interaction with you would be the same, there would be nothing to drive or lead you back home. There would be nothing to help you, call you to be able to improve. So when the person feels like they're lost, the person feels like they're unprotected, they know that they need to double down and come back to their prayer and come back to their faith. My friends, listen to this. It turns out that for someone like Bilam, Hashem happens to him. For someone like Moshe, God forbid we can't use that word. How could such a thing be? And this is where I'm driving. How could such a thing be? If God appears to those, is connected to those that are connected to him, Bilam is a prophet of God. He's having actual conversations with Hashem. Go read the pasuk, you'll see. But they come, they ask him, curse the Jews. Bilam says, stay over, I don't know. I hope I'll get a prophecy from God. What to happen? I need to know. That night he has a dream. Hashem's like, don't go. Bilam wakes up the next morning. I can't go. Da-da-da. They're back and forth. Bilam is like, they're offering more. Should we reconsider? They're going to franchise tag me. What are we doing? Right? Hashem says, you want to go? Go, but whatever I'm going to say, I'm going to put in your mouth. That's what you'll have to say. Bilam's like, great, he's saddling the donkey. He's literally having an interactive conversation with God where he understands what God is saying. He's on his way. The angel appears in front of his donkey. 3 times he thinks it's a donkey. The angel starts speaking to Bilam. He's like, what are you doing? You didn't see me? You didn't realize that I was here? Bilam's throat, he bows to the... How could you say that Bilam had a happens to be relationship with God? How could you say that Bilam did not have faith in God? How could you not have faith with someone you're actually speaking to? How could you not have faith in someone you're actually bowing to? And this question bothered me until I realized that all of us are Bilam. Come to shul, talking to him. We come to Modim, we're bowing to him. We're talking, we're bowing. But then we do things in our life that illustrate a life that is marked by a lack of faith. A person who does something dishonest in business to achieve some level of an advance, of a betterment of a situation, that's a lack of emunah. A person who talks lashon hara about somebody because they want a better chance for themselves at that deal. You don't really want to do it. Look, if you want to do the deal with the guy, fine. But you should maybe ask some of his former business partners. I'm not saying that you shouldn't say that. Maybe the halakha should be that you tell the guy. But if you're doing that, you're angling. You don't believe that God can give it to you. If you're compromising your values in any way, shape, or form to do anything, if all of those things, if you decide to not go to pray that day, you know why? Because I have a very important business meeting. That's a decision that I think the meeting is more important than my prayers. I'm talking, I'm bowing, and I don't believe. My friends, the bottom line of our rabbit hole says as follows. As much as you believe, as much as you connect, that's how much you experience Hashem in your life. If you feel like you need a little bit more God in your life right now, all you need to do is open the door and bring a little bit more God into your life. Work on emunah. Study the books. Go to the classes. Pray with a little bit slower. Focus on those words. Ask Hashem to open those doors for your heart, for your mind. And then the person experiences a physical intervention in their life like they've not yet experienced. May Hashem bless us to be able to experience Vayikra, each and every one of us in our own lives. May Hashem bless us to feel that closeness. May Hashem bless us to feel and to experience those solutions in what is right now a very crazy world. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.